All right, so let's just get started right away. I know we have around an hour. I want to use that time wisely. But again, anytime you guys have a question about any concepts, HTML, CSS related, just stop me and we'll discuss them. But all right, so our challenge today is basically to mock up LinkedIn. So I'm going to use a reference that I have in this other browser. I'm going to use Bill Gates' LinkedIn to kind of try to recreate what Bill Gates has. Again, it's not going to look exactly like what he has, and we're not going to completely create this page because it is a lot of time. But I just want to kind of go about, well, how do I attempt to recreate this in my own code? So I'm going to start off with the concept of wireframing. So wireframing has certain different meanings. You can get into different levels of wireframing. I'm going to keep it really simple. So the first thing I do when I try to design a page, either recreating a page or just trying to create my own page, I mentally try to visualize the boxes on a page. And this is what I'm going to do through a wireframing tool. But usually I do this mentally, but obviously not going to be a good exercise. So I'm going to go to draw.io. This is one of many sites you can find out there. It's going to redirect us. I'll decide later. All right, so I'm just going to try sketching what my page should kind of look like. So looking at LinkedIn, basically my goal right now is just to pick out the boxes within boxes within boxes. That's what HTML structure is. It's a bunch of boxes within other boxes. That's the way I think of it. So here, if I'm looking at this page, I'm just trying to pick out the biggest boxes first and then find the smaller boxes within them. So looking at this page right here, I'm noticing like a total separation between the header up here, right, this area, and all the content below. I'm visualizing two different boxes. Now, again, there could be different ways to represent this, but for me, I see a clear division between the header up here and all the content down here. So I'm going to create a separation for that. So I'm going to go to boxes. I don't know how easy this tool will be. Basically, if I'm trying to represent my page, the top section is going to be here, and I'm going to create another box down here. And this is going to be all the rest of the content, right? So I'm just, again, trying to start big and then going to go smaller later. I'm not sure if I could add text here, but I'm just going to keep it with boxes. But if you guys can kind of imagine, this is the header area, which I'm going to fill in all this stuff up here. We'll go into this top box, and all the stuff down here, everything, the main content is going to be in the bigger box. All right, so once we have like this started, we could move on and go to our HTML code or keep adding boxes within boxes. I'm going to get to the HTML code, just we get something started and keep iterating where we create just two boxes to start off with and then create more content as we dig deeper. So I'm going to go to my coding window. Index.html is usually our starting page here. So I'm going to code this up from scratch, not going to use any snippets. So to create an HTML document, we need to start with an HTML tag and then a closing tag. VS Code usually will automatically insert the closing tag, but always remember you need to have a closing tag for every opening tag that you have. So this tag is named HTML. The closing tag is /, so / and the same tag name. So just get some terminology going here. This is a tag. This entire thing is an element. So this is my HTML element, and anything that goes in between is the content for this tag. So you can put comments by putting angle brackets, exclamation mark, dash, dash. Kind of a weird syntax, but that's how you can add comments. So this is the content for my HTML element. All right, so an element is composed of tags and content. So this is the content. Not every tag is going to have content, but most of them will, or maybe not even most, but a lot of them do. So inside my HTML elements, I need to add some more nested elements. And this is kind of the whole structure of HTML. It's a tree where you have a parent node, and then within that you have children, and those children can have more children, and so on. You can go down the line. So to start a page, we always want to have a head section. So I'm going to create a head section with a matching closing tag. And then we also always want a body section. All right, so I have my web page kind of active right here. So this is what my web page looks like right now. There's nothing on it, nothing exciting, not even a title here. So in our head section, again, this is most of the stuff we put in here is not for the user. It's mostly for the web page itself. Like we could load our CSS in our head section, load our JavaScript, add some meta tags, which is like for search engine searching, The one thing the user can see is the title of this document. So in this case, right now I have no title, so it just picks whatever the file name is. Let's add a nice title. So I'm going to call it links in mockup. And if I save that, this title will now be shown up here. If I guess I had a refresh there, but LinkedIn mockup is the title of my page. So that's where that comes from. It looks in your head section, it looks explicitly for a title tag. Keep in mind, your title tag must be in your head section. You can't put it in the body section. It's just not going to work the way you want it to. All right, but the real thing we care about is the body section. So we have a body tag here, a body element. All the content within this body element is what the user is actually going to see on their page. So again, the head section, not too important. And one thing I do want to mention, in case it was unclear, the tabbing or indentation of your HTML does not matter one bit. I could technically write this all on a single line, and it will work just the same. My browser does not care how it's, the white space does not matter for the browser. But as a developer, I want to read it, write it in a way that others can read it and myself can read it. So it's really easy to know that this title element is a child of my head element because it's kind of indented and nested within it. So just to make it clear, the tabbing doesn't matter. I'm going to actually remove some tabbing here, just so I don't indent as much. But again, so the body section, as mentioned, this is our key thing to show to our users. So let's just start off by adding a header just to see what it looks like. So I'm going to put hello world. A header tag, again, this is one of many visual tags. If I had to pick, there's probably like 10, perhaps, maybe 10 main tags that you need to worry about. Again, there's hundreds of tags potentially, but 10 main ones that you'll probably see. Maybe if I could get a list of them, give me one moment. All right, I think I have this list somewhere. Okay, so these are probably the main tags you need to know. Maybe what's the best way to do it? I guess I'll put my slideshow on here. Okay, so just to have some reference to what I'm referencing. These are probably the most common tags you're gonna need to deal with. Again, these aren't the only tags, but these are the ones that I would expect all of you guys should know how to use them and what they do. So first we'll talk about headers. There are 6 different header types, and this should just make content delivery a little easier. Header tags are just basically glorified paragraph tags, if you want to imagine that way, that have bolder font, larger font, just to stick out on a page. So header 1 will be your largest header. Header 6 will be pretty small, but still bold. So if you want to kind of quickly see that, let's add a bunch of headers just to have fun with it. I know this isn't relevant to LinkedIn. We can do an H3, which is going to be smaller. H5 is going to be even smaller. So these are how header tags work. Let's make my page bigger. All right, so these are header tags, again, just delivering content onto the page. Likewise, paragraph tags, that's for your main text. So your headers are just like, hey, title of the page, paragraph text, usually where all your textual content will be wrapped in. Again, you don't have to have paragraph tags, you just use divs. But paragraph tags are meant to indicate that this is text document or textual information. We also have links. So I'm not sure how much we've had experience with working with links, but anything you click on, like on, you go to cnn.com or, amazon.com, any link you click on is going to be an A tag. This is short for anchor, but A is just quicker to type. So I guess that's why we go with the A tag. But if we want to create a link, we could do that quickly. So let's just say, let's add a paragraph. This is my text, and this is going to be a link. All right. So again, text stuff usually goes inside a paragraph tag. Let's say I want to make a link right here. I'm going to actually surround that portion with an A tag. So some terminology to keep in mind here. Certain elements are inline, meaning in this case, an A tag can go within a paragraph tag and it's not going to like create a new line. A tags are inline, meaning they don't need their own space, versus header tags and paragraph tags, they want the entire horizontal space. So notice that each one of these is on a different line. That's not me doing it. That's automatically how that tag is parsed, so that they want to take up the entire horizontal space here. Versus an A tag, can be kind of nested within any other tag, and it's not going to demand its own space. So in this case, if I want to create a link, I add an A tag, and then I need a href, stands for hyperlink reference. And I can link to anywhere I want to. So I think I mentioned cnn.com. We go to http:// www.cnn.com. Hopefully that's their web page. So this says when the user clicks on this, they'll be taken to this page. So if you want to see that, there's a link. If I click on it, open a new tab, cool, cnn.com. Obviously the news isn't as exciting or very welcoming to see, especially this week, but that's how we create a tag, hyperlink. I'm not going to go through all of these because again, I want to focus on our LinkedIn challenge, but images, if you want to show images, use img tag. Lists, so again, if you're listing like your top 10 favorite something, you want to use ordered list. If it's just a collection with no ordering, unordered list. Either one of these will use list items. So if you want to quickly see how to create lists, just to get some more data here, let's say paragraph, my favorite ice cream flavors. Okay, so let's create an unordered list. So I'm not going to rank them, but every element needs to be a list item. So here I might say, honestly, my favorite flavor is mint chocolate chip. I know it's very divisive flavor, but I think it's delicious. If I could spell this. But I do like other flavors, like one that I had recently was caramel cookie crunch. But I can't spell any of these words, so apologies. Anyway, so this is what lists look like. Again, they have bullet points. They're kind of indented. Again, we've seen lists probably on web pages, so I'm not going to go too much into them. Last thing I really want to talk about are sections. So we've seen divs a lot. Divs don't have anything special about them. They're just boxes. And that's the boxes that I was kind of drawing up in my diagram here. These are going to be divs for me. I could use other elements, but divs make the most sense. They're meant to create kind of divisions on your page. Spans are the same thing as divs, except the big difference between divs and spans are that divs are block level elements, meaning they want to take up the entire horizontal space. Spans are inline, meaning you could add spans within a paragraph. It's not going to break the line or do anything fancy. Spans say, hey, I don't care about the area. Divs say, I do care about the area. Any questions about any of these tags before we go on? Okay, so let's get back to our main challenge. Sorry for that diversion, but I drew two boxes. I want to represent this on my page. So to do that, I'm going to use divs. So let's go to our page. I'm going to delete this content because I actually want to create boxes. So I'm going to do a div, and then I'm going to create another div that are non-nested. So this is my top box. Let's just actually write that in. Let's say navigation section. This is going to be main content section. All right, so if I save this, let's take a look like what it looks like. All right, nothing too exciting. This doesn't quite look like LinkedIn just yet, but we're getting there. So what I want to actually do is represent these boxes actually as boxes. And this is where I'm going to incorporate CSS to get some more visual elements going here. So we could actually identify where these boxes begin and end. All right, so time for CSS. If you remember, we need to link it using, what was it? Link. I always forget this, so I'll probably have to look this up, but the relationship is style sheet. And I think it's src. And then I need to create a file. So I'm going to say styles.css. And I think this is self-closing. Okay, so I need to create a CSS file as specified. So I'm going to create a new file just next to my index.html, call it styles.css. That's what I chose to name it. And here I'm going to add my CSS style. Well, let's make sure this actually works. So initially I'm just going to create a body selector and color the background some color to make sure this actually works, or if not, I'll need to link up better. So I'm going to pick dark cyan, not the best color. But let's see if the background color of my entire page is now going to be dark cyan. If not, that means my linking here is probably not correct. All right, refresh here. All right, so I definitely screwed that up. Let's go to the Googles because I always forget this. Link CSS to HTML. how do we do this? We do rel href, sorry. So instead of src, that should be href. That is my bad. Okay, there we go. So notice the page changed color. So now my CSS is in fact linked with my HTML. So I'm ready to go now. Again, I want to create boxes here. So I'm going to create a couple of, let's create identifiers. So I'm going to target an ID of nav. Let's say navigation. And I'm also going to create a selector for main content. These are names that I'm coming up with. These are just like variables almost, if you want to think of them that way. These are going to target the IDs within my index.html. So let's get that split screen. So in my index.html, I actually want to have these identifiers targeting one of these elements. So in this case, this div is going to have an ID of navigation. That's the name I chose. And then this div is going to have an ID of main content. Because again, that's what I want to name. Okay, cool. So we got the CSS selectors. So again, hashtag means you're targeting ID. If you have a period something, that's going to target a class. So if I had class names here, let's just add those for fun. If I had a class, I could have something here and something. Again, you can reuse classes. That's the whole point of creating classes, but IDs should be unique. So IDs, do not repeat them. Classes, you can have as many shared instances of using that class as you want. So in this case, if I want to target anything with that class name, I'd use period, because that is the syntax for CSS, and then the name of the class. In this case, I've literally called it something. But right now I want to focus on each element. So let's add some items here. So heights is a CSS property. There's a ton of properties out there. I'm not sure if we saw them all, and I probably don't know most of them. Let's go to our curriculum page on Monday, because that has a lot of good content on it. Go down to the CSS section. Specificity, that's a good topic. Where is that link? CSS ref. I know it's on here somewhere. I'm just going to look it up because. All right, Cssreference Io. This is a great site. It just lists every single property that could exist that you can target. So there's background color, which we've seen. There's borders you can add. Again, there's a ton of them. There's probably over 100 of them listed here. I don't know all of them, but again, you can kind of see what's out there if you want to align some items. There's a lot of things to know out there. There's no magic way to know it aside from just reading documentation and getting familiar with it. So I do know there's a height property. So let's say I want to make it 100 pixels. That's going to be my navigation. And then my main content, I want to use a percent. So let's say I want to make that 100%. That should eat up the rest of the space, I think. So let's actually check. And the best way to check, honestly, is just add a background color. So background, oops, we need a semicolon to separate each item. Background color, let's go with a nice yellow. So I'm gonna use some color codes here. We'll go, or I might go orange. FF CC00. Hopefully that's some orangish color. And then again, every property has a name and a value, and you need to separate them with semicolons. This is again just CSS syntax. So semicolon, add a new property. Let's go with background color, and let's pick a predefined color. So I'll go with dark orchid. Sounds fancy. All right, so let's actually see what our boxes look like now. I give them each a height. I'm not sure if this will actually do what I want. Let's check it out. All right, there we go. So notice we have two sections. We have our upper box and lower box, and this kind of mimics what I have in my diagram. I have two boxes. I guess I could kind of join them because that's what I'm trying to recreate here. So this is honestly how I start kind of mentally picking out the boxes, the biggest boxes first, and then creating the divs that represent those boxes. So notice I have a div here and a div here, and I've kind of controlled the sizing and the coloring, just kind of identifying. I feel like I've been talking for a while, so I want to pause here. Any questions about how we got to this point? Okay, so I have my two biggest boxes, navigation section and main content. Again, we can kind of see we've made some progress into recreating this. But obviously there's some other things I might want to add in. Like there's this area will be called margin, as in it's just, or it could be padding, I guess, depends on which way you look at it. But this is just white space that is added to the page. So notice that my box here goes pretty much all the way to the edge. But the LinkedIn page has definitely some gutter space here that I need to add in. That's true for the navigation and for down here. So there's a couple ways we could do this. Let's go to our CSS. And since I already have this class, I'm going to actually leverage that, but I want to name it a little better. So I'm going to name this class, let's call it main gutter. I don't know. I'm not always the greatest at naming, but gutters just on the side. So that's the class I'm going to target. And now this can apply to both of these divs because I'm targeting that class again by a period, not a hashtag. And for main gutters, I want to add something called margin. Margin, have you gone over the box model? That's something really important to know. Again, we do cover it on Monday, but I know we didn't have a formal lecture. But the box model is pretty important to know and important enough where I want to take a quick tangent. So let's go to my webpage. I'm going to bring up the property inspector. So Command Option I on a Mac or Chrome. Go to elements. Let me inspect one of these elements. Where's that box model? Layout. Computed. So if you go to the computed tab within elements, this is what the box model is. And it's really important for CSS to know what the box model represents. So notice there's 4 parts to the box. This blue area right here, this is your main content area. Then optionally, you can have padding, which is the next outer level. The padding is meant to be white space between your border of your element and the content of your element. In this case, I have 0 padding, so you can't really see it highlighted, but that's just any white space that you want between the border of the element and your content. That's what padding is meant for. Then optionally, you can have a border. In this case, I do not have a border. I could add these in shortly, but the border is just any like edge that you want to show with a border. And then margin is actually outside of your element. It's not part of the area for your element. It's just external padding versus padding is internal buffer. So let me say that again. Margin is external space. Padding is internal spacing. All right, so that's the box model. Again, important to know, you can Google it, pretty easy to find. Just kind of understand what margin represents and what padding represents in the context of CSS. So here I'm setting a margin. I'm going to set that to, let's do margin left is going to be 200 pixels, and then my margin right is going to be the same. So the left and right, I don't care about top and bottom margins, so that's why I'm specifying only left and right, and we'll do 200 pixels. All right, so left and right can have 200 pixels of just dead area. This is one way to write it. You can also just use the margin property that takes in top, bottom, left, and right. There's some ordering there. If you only have 2 values, it's going to do, I believe, top and bottom first, and then left and right will be the second value. So this would be another way to write the same exact thing that I have here. So this I'm specifying left and right. The margin property will just say, hey, this is top and bottom. This is left and right if you only provided 2 values. If you provided 3 values and interpret those values differently. But let's just go with 2 values. And I think that should be what I want. All right, so there we go. Notice we have this kind of extra area here. Now the question is this actually what we want? Take a look at our LinkedIn page. Well, like we have this area here for the background. Maybe we need the white area for the navigation menu. Like here, we're just using the background color. That's something we might want to look into, but for now, I'm not going to worry about that. It's minor on my list of concerns right now. But cool, we got some more spacing, looks closer, but obviously still not close enough to our LinkedIn page. So let's continue on here. So I have my 2 main boxes. I'm pretty good with those boxes right now. Now comes the iteration part where we have our biggest boxes. Now we want to pick out smaller boxes. And this requires some practice, some experience, but let's try to do it ourselves right now. So I'm going to focus only on the nav bar. So the upper box, and try to pick smaller boxes within them. And it might be a little confusing of like, why do we need smaller boxes? Why can't we just put all these elements in there? And that's just kind of a limitation. Like CSS layouts need these boxes so you can do achieve exactly the spacing and alignment that you want to. All right, so let's create more smaller boxes. So for that, I'm going to add another box. within this box. And this is going to be, let's see. So looking at this, I have the search portion is one box in my eyes, and all these icons and whatever else links are another box. So there's just two separate boxes there. So I'll create one box here, let's create another box, put it over here. All right, so that box probably goes like that far. There's some space between here. I'm trying to represent accurately what they have here. All right, so those are my two smaller boxes. But as mentioned, we get boxes within boxes within boxes. It gets pretty complicated. But within my search box right here, so the search box is what I'm kind of arrowing over here. We have two smaller pieces. We have like an icon and an input over here. So that's just more boxes for us. So create another box. Yes, it does get tedious at times. By just trying to do this kind of how I approach it mentally. So that's our box within box. We have our search box. Within that, we have an icon and like a text input. Over here, I don't think we necessarily need more boxes because these are just icons. They can be individual items. But I guess we could represent with boxes maybe. I'm not going to do that, sorry. So we have two boxes. That's kind of what they'll look like. So let's actually recreate this in our HTML page. So we have two smaller boxes within our navigation box. Jake, question.
Yeah, here's where I'm wondering about like the whole idea of like best practices.
Sure.
Because couldn't like you chose to put the search box and the icon, the logo, the LinkedIn logo together in a div called search box or whatever it was that you named it.
Right.
Like why wouldn't I would think maybe somebody could choose to just put the LinkedIn logo off to the side as its own little thing in that top section, and then right next to it put a search box, and then way over on the right. So like what's the best practice? Like why would you determine to put certain things together collected in one div section, and other times you might leave something out of it?
Yeah, I'm so glad you asked this question. I think I definitely glossed over it. The reason I did this, and again, you might have different design approaches, but the reason I think this is the way to do it is because I'm just looking at the alignment. So notice that all this stuff is on the right side and all this stuff is aligned left. So for these two items are left aligned, so that I'm gonna put them into one single box. The way layouts work, I can't just say, hey, let's have an item, let's have another item, let's add some random space and then add more items. It's not possible very easily with CSS. So again, if I'm like resizing this, notice as I get to a critical point, this space starts getting eaten up. So this is actually space. It's not like an element that's like taking up dead space. It's actual like space that has nothing in it. So when I start condensing this, notice that these icons are still moving together as in one box, right? They're not getting any closer together, right? Let me just do this kind of slowly. So those icons are keeping their spacing with respect to each other, but this space is being eaten up. So notice that this box also is not changing in size at any point. I mean, there's, I guess, some responsiveness when we get small enough, but I'm picking out these boxes based on how I know they are set up. Like, again, it's easy to see when we move this around that these items move together as one, and then these two items kind of behave together as one. So that's why I've identified that these are two separate sections. I'm going to create two medium boxes, and within those, I could create additional boxes to kind of represent the layout. I don't know if that was a satisfying answer, but I want to make sure I did attempt to answer it, Jake.
Yeah, that was good. I'm just wondering then if you're looking ahead like to responsiveness, if you say to yourself, okay, when this screen size starts to shrink,
yep.
And if you wanted to like make the LinkedIn logo disappear, is that like part of the thought process? Is it easier to make it disappear if it's not part of the search bar, or is it still just as easy if it's inside that search div with the search box? You know what I mean? Like, yeah. do you think ahead to those kind of things? And
no, I do not. So I know we went over responsiveness on Wednesday. It's a great topic to know about, especially when you're trying to create professional websites. However, like that's not something I'm concerned with. To answer your question, will it be easier to like hide an element if it's within a box with something else? No, not necessarily. It shouldn't impact how easily we hide stuff or size stuff. It's just kind of how they're grouped is how I'm trying to group them in my diagram here. Was there another question or comment out there? Okay, so I'm going to create my medium boxes first. So notice in this navigation box, I have 2 medium boxes. So I'm going to create those first. Let's go back to our code. I'm going to get rid of the text here. You know what that is. Create 2 divs. Again, these are non-nested. They are not children of one another. They are siblings. They are not parent-child. So I have 2 divs here. So let's say this is going to be my search section, and this is going to be my icons section. Let's see how those look. All right, so this is in my navigation one. I'm not worried about main content right now. Oops, where we go? There we go. All right, so these are the 2 divs I've added. Now there's a slight problem here, and you probably know what I'm going to say already. They're stacked on top of one another, right? I have section div on top, icons on bottom. This is a default behavior for divs, or for most elements. They're going to go line by line. That's just the way your browser parses the HTML and displays them on the screen. But this is not what I want. Like, looking at the LinkedIn, I don't have my search bar on top of these icons. They're left and right of each other. So this is something I need to solve. And there are a few CSS ways to solve this. I'm not going to go over all of them. I'm going to go over the one that I would highly recommend to kind of focus on. And we'll just go with that. So this is where we get into Fluxbox. Fluxbox sounds kind of like really scary, like a new thing. It's not super crazy. It's actually, once you use it more, it's really powerful and really beneficial to use for layouts. So I'm going to incorporate Flex display. Again, I don't need to install anything. I don't need to download anything. Fluxbox, just like a concept on ways you can display things. So to do this, I'm still going to target the parent container here, which is navigation. And I'm going to add a display type. So the display, in this case, I'm going to change it to Flex. I believe the default display is block or inline, like those are types we've seen. Flex is a different type of display style. So I'm putting this in the parent. So in this case, my parent div is navigation. I'm telling it to display its children using the Fluxbox properties. So if I save this, notice now that these 2 sections are next to one another, right? This is the default Fluxbox implementation. They put things next to each other instead of on top of each other. We can control this. If I want to get back to, on top bottom, Fluxbox does give you the ability to do that. So I know Raphael referenced this page, and honestly, this is my favorite page too for Fluxbox. So I'm just going to search Fluxbox CSS. Should be the first result because this is an amazing page. I love the diagrams I have. So again, they'll talk about display type. So we set Flex. Again, you can set Flex direction. So if you want to go left to right, up, down. Again, you can control a lot of things with Fluxbox. So I'm not going to go through all of these, obviously, because there's a lot to go through. But the one I am going to talk about is justify content in just a second. Because, again, if we look at our HTML page, sorry, maybe I should do this all in one browser. Let me copy this so I don't want to switch as much. All right, so again, this is a great reference, highly recommend it. I love these visuals because that makes more sense to me than reading text. But looking at the LinkedIn page, as I mentioned, there's this space, right? The search box was kind of left aligned. These icons are right aligned in this area. So I want to achieve that with Fluxbox. And Fluxbox makes it pretty easy with justify content. This is one of many properties we can use. But I'm trying to look at these visuals and say, well, right now my page has, these 2 are both left aligned, because that's the default behavior. They're just next to each other. That's not what I want. I want some space between this box and that box. So let's actually create boxes quickly so we can see the visuals. I'm going to give these IDs. Let's call this search div, and ID equals icons div. Again, not the best naming, but now that I have these IDs, I can target them in CSS. Again, we use hashtag for IDs. So I'm going to go with search div. And I just want to give it some height and color. So we'll do heights, pixel heights. Let's make those 80 pixels. And color, these are just going to be gross colors. Obviously, they're just for visual uses. Let's go with the chocolate for search div. And then I'm going to do the same thing for my icons div. And then let's give it another color. So let's see what selections we have. So again, this is Visual Studio Code. Just give me options. You can put any color you want using a color code. So if I want to make up my own color, let's go with a nice bright blue, maybe. Hopefully that stands out. Okay, so just gonna give some boxiness for this. I want background color, sorry. background color. So color impacts the font color, background color, as you might imagine, it's for the background. All right, so add more colors here. Again, these are just boxes we're seeing here. So, all right, there's my boxes. So you can kind of imagine what will go in here. It's going to be the icon and search in the text field, and these will be all the icons. But again, I want that spacing between these two. So this is where Fluxbox comes back into place. Again, reading my great documentation. Which one of these do I want? Which one represents the closest thing that I want? Well, there's space around, which looks kind of close to what I want. But in this case, space around adds some spacing to the very left and right. That's not what I want looking here. Like this is flush with this area right here. So I think from these selections, space between looks like the most correct option I want. I want each of the items on the left and right. All the other extra space should be added in between them. So space between is going to be my justify content value for the parent. So I go back to my CSS. Navigation is my parent. I'm going to add. It doesn't really matter the order you add it. I'm just going to keep the flux properties together. Justify content, and this is going to be space between. So I'm telling it the children should be organized in some manner where all the space, extra space, should be between the children, because that's what we want. So here, let's go back here. There we go. Notice my search section is now on the far left, icons far right. That is exactly what I wanted. Obviously, not exactly here, but because I don't have any icons and search stuff, but that's the layout that I want. Now there's some other considerations like, well, if I actually did have like a search box or search text field here, it's gonna be at the very top of the box. What if I want it centered in this box? And what if I actually want this box, this orange box and blue box centered with respect to this gold colored box, which is the navigation box? Well, that's where Fluxbox gives you the ability to do that. I believe it's align items center. I might need to double check this, but this is saying I want the items to be vertically centered. So let's see how that changed. Notice that now these are actually centered. These boxes are centered. The text within the box is still top level or top aligned, but these boxes are now centered with respect to their parent div. If I did want this text to be centered, that's something I could do with my search div. So here I would add another display type of flex. This is not inherited. But now I'm saying anything within my search div should also take on flex properties. In this case, I want to align items center for that search div. Again, if I'm going too quickly, please do stop me. But let's actually see how setting flex on my search div or search box with align item center. Now this should do what I want. Notice, there we go. My search section is actually vertically centered within that box. And I probably want to do the same with my icon section, but I just wanted to highlight kind of differences with using flex properties and the default properties of a div. All right, we're making slow and steady progress to get to our final product. All right, I'm not going to do the entire nav bar, but I'm just going to do a few more additions just to get something that looks close to what we want. So here I'm going to add a couple other things. Let's add another. Maybe we don't need another div. We'll add an image of some sort. This will have a source that I don't know yet. Image tags don't have any content. So an image tag is one example of a tag that's both an opening tag and a closing tag all in one. Most tags require a separate opening and closing one. Certain tags, if they don't have any content, as in nothing goes between the opening and closing tag, you can create a closing tag within itself. So here I'm going to have some icon. We're going to have an input field. This is just going to be input, placeholder, search, maybe is what it's called. We don't need a type, but I'm just going to be explicit about it. It's going to be text field. And then I think this can be self-closing also. All right, there we go. We got a search thing here. Obviously, I don't have an image. Search, I need a LinkedIn image. Let's quickly find one on the web. So linked in small logo. All right, bunch of images to search for. Let's just find one that's similar enough. Let's go with flat icon. Hopefully I don't have to pay for it. Let's go visits. All right, so I'm gonna try to steal their URL if I can find it, copy image address. And then my source is simply gonna be the address I copied. All right, nothing too gross, but it's probably gonna be the full size. So by default, it should take on the full size. Yeah, I don't want it this big. That is way too big. So let's actually set a width property. just inside the image elements. Again, we could do this in CSS. Width is kind of one of those properties that can be done in HTML or through CSS, but I'm just going to do it in HTML here. Let's say I think 24 pixels maybe might be small enough. I'm not sure how to eyeball this appropriately. Okay, there we go. Notice it's small enough. I think it's a good size. Maybe make it 20. 20 pixels. Okay, I think that lines up well. So notice it looks similar to this, but again, it's very tedious. But notice between my icon here and my search, there's actually some white space here. Versus my page right now, they're kind of flush next to each other. So this is again where margin can come into play. So if I want to add some margin, I would need to, let's give an ID here for, let's call this search input. Well, now that I have an ID, great, I can target that within my CSS. So it's his name search input. I give that just some baby margins on the left. Let's just say, I don't know, how does 8 pixels sound? Hopefully that will be recognizable. All right, so I want to add some space between my input and image. So I'm going to use margin to do that. And there we go. We got some space, a little bigger than I wanted, to be honest. But again, gets the point across that we have that space here. Again, I feel like I've been talking a lot, so I want to pause here. Any questions on any of the CSS things we did with Fluxbox or anything else that we want to discuss? Okay, dokes. I'm going to take that as we're going well. I'm just going to find some random icons. I'm not going to spend too much time on this. All right, cool. That looks like a cool icon. Home icon, flat icons. All right, let me steal that. Copy image address and add some random icons into my icon section. So here, I want image, source, what I just stole, width. So width, one thing to mention about width, if you only set width, the height will automatically scale appropriately, unless you want to stretch it out. Then you can specify a different height and width if you don't want to maintain the proportions. In this case, I want the port to be maintained. I'm just going to add the same image a bunch of times just to have some visual elements. See what that looks like on the page. There we go. Got a bunch of icons. Again, notice that these aren't centered. If I did want to center them, well, I could do the same thing I did here. Display flex, align item center. But this is where we get into a question of, well, repeated code, right? We talked about the dry principle with coding. The same applies for CSS styling. Notice I have display flex, align item center here. Also have it here, and I want to do that for my icons div also. Well, I could just create another, another section here, or I actually already have that, and say, all right, copy and paste. Not a big deal. It's 2 lines of code, but it's the same styling that I'm applying. So this is where we should create a class instead of just targeting each element one by one, because we have some shared properties visually between some of these boxes. So let's create a quick class, and I'm going to name that class. Again, we use dot as a selector. Let's call it center vertically. Make it very descriptive. Let's call it center children vertically. And I'm going to take everything that I want. So display flex, align items center. And then now I can just reuse that class for those elements rather than recreating that styling over and over again. So let's get rid of that redundancy. And now I need to add a class to my code. I'm going to make my code a little smaller. All right, so I wanted my navigation to have that class. So we'll call this center children vertically. Yeah, vertically. Kind of a long class name. Usually you want shorter class names, but whatever. We also have it for this inner box, has that same styling. We want the children to be centered. And now this element also wants that same styling, right? So they're all using the class center children vertically, which I've told it means use display flex and align items center. So kind of reusing code there. And there we go. Notice icons are centered and everything looks closer to what I want. Maybe I want some padding here. Let's add some quick padding. Joseph, I think you had a question. So let me know. What's up?
Yeah, I was wondering, as you're building this out, what's the proper way to organize the CSS file? Like, do you just go down the list as you're building? Or do you try to group? classes versus IDs, or is it just kind of whatever?
Great question. My response and my approach here is kind of whatever. I try to keep similar things together. I'm sure there are better practices out there, and I apologize for maybe not being the best example. Usually you actually want to create multiple CSS files to kind of space everything out. So instead of having one file that has 500 lines of CSS styles, maybe break it out. Like I might have a nav style file, and also like a main content style file, and maybe a main one that if they're sharing properties, that could be a good way to organize CSS classes and selectors. But yeah, in this case, I'm just kind of putting it all in one just for speed's sake. But it's a great question you ask. I'd say there's probably good advice on the web that better than I can offer. So I'll defer to the web for best practices there. But again, you can create multiple CSS files and incorporate all of them into your single HTML file. But good question. All right. So let me just kind of complete the nav bar because I think the more interesting part is below, and we are getting close to our time. So I create another class just for my icon sets and margins. So I call that nav icon margin, and that's really the last thing I think I'll do with my nav bar. So let's go margin. I want them to have left and right margins, so 0 pixels and 8 pixels, what I want once before. Just give these guys more space. There we go. So we got more spaces here. Again, looking similar to this. Again, I'm not exactly going with this. I know there's icons and text. There's a way to do that where you could have icons and text on top of each other. Not going to spend the time right now because I think there's better things to get to, but if you guys are interested, we could maybe find some time to cover that. All right, cool. So I think my nav bar looks pretty good. Obviously the sizing isn't greatest, so I'll clean that up a little bit. Navigation can be 60 pixels, and then my boxes here can be maybe 50. Search div. Okay, let's see how that looks. Okay, that's small enough, maybe a little smaller, and I'll leave it alone, I promise. 40, and these can be 36. And then how does that look? Okay, cool. Obviously, let's type something. All right, there we go. So this is my nav bar. Everything looks pretty close to the actual thing. Again, not ideally, but obviously with the coloring, it looks kind of off. So let's actually just move those box colorings because we just had those for funsies. So I'm just going to add CSS comments, get rid of those kind of ugly colors, but we did want a white. So let's go with background color of white for this. So there are some reserved color names. So white is a popular color, but you can create, as I said, your own color. So FFFFF is also white. All right, cool. There's my header. I'm not sure I still have blue. Oops, that. All right, so again, that took a lot of time just to create this nav section right here. We want to get to the main content, and this is something I do want to get into. So again, I'm going to say hard cutoff time will be 2:45 because I know you guys have a 3 o'clock social hour. I want to give you guys a break too. Let's try to kind of visualize the boxes here and see how far we can get. So going back to my kind of wireframing diagram, we did the top part. You guys can imagine what went in there. But let's look at our main content box. So this big area down here, we're focusing on all this stuff here. I can't really highlight it well, but this is my main content box. Within that, I want to pick out the smaller boxes within there. And again, this takes some practice, but you want to look at like the hard lines. Your boxes cannot be jagged or like have more than 4 corners. It's literally just a 4-sided box. So here, looking at this page, I see 2 boxes, and it's not always obvious where these boxes are. Again, it requires some practice, some experience, but these boxes are from here, from here down to here. That's one box. This is one box, all the way going down to the bottom of the page. Then we have a second box over here. This narrower box goes all the way down to the page potentially also. So those are my 2 separations. So if I were to wireframe that, I'm going to say this box, this is this box right here, goes all the way down to the page. And then I have another box over next to it. So they're left and right of each other. And it goes, yeah. All right, so these are the boxes my eyes have picked out, where again, if you guys can visualize it, this stuff, all of this stuff is one box, and all of this stuff is one box also, as far as that goes. But within this, medium box, we definitely can probably see, it's probably easy to see those small boxes like this from here to here. I don't know if you guys see my mouse cursor well enough. This is one box. This is another small box. This is another small box, the about section. There's a featured section. I'm not going to create all these, but we can, it's pretty easy to see those boxes. So if I were to diagram that, within that medium box, I have, you know, the main profile box right here. And then I have another box below it. And again, we don't have to create every single box in a wireframe. There's some box there. Oops. Some box here. And you guys get it. Again, it goes all the way down to the page. I don't know how many boxes there might be, but I'm gonna just focus on maybe creating 2. And this side over here has other size boxes. And the reason I knew these were 2 separate boxes is because the sizes of the smaller boxes don't align. So again, it's all about alignment. That kind of should be your giveaway of stuff that are of how the boxes are kind of represented. So any questions about what I'm trying to convey with all this box stuff? So what I mean here is that these 2 boxes, notice like that bottom edge is not aligned with any box on this side. And that's what told my eyes visually that these 2 are separate boxes, because this box right here, notice the bottom of it has no alignment with this box over here. So that's how I knew that these are columns and not rows going across. Questions? Please, please, please ask something. All right, no question. All right, let's power through. All right, so these are, again, we have medium boxes and then we have smaller boxes within those. So let's actually go about doing this. We're gonna do this a little quicker just because we've had some experience creating boxes. Let's go to our main content section down here. Let me scroll down a bit. All right, so we're gonna create a box and then another box. These are 2 medium boxes that are left and right of each other. Let's call this box main div, and then this one will be side div. All right, just give them the ID so I could maybe target them. Main div, again, is all this stuff right here, all of these boxes or all of this content. That's my main div. So within there, I'm going to have smaller boxes. So let's give a div for, let's say, profile heading. And then I think there's another div, people. Let's just say there's going to be an about section and maybe a featured section. Again, I'm not doing all of these. Let's just do, what was this? So in our main div, we have another small box. That one is the about, let's call it about. We maybe have another one called featured, whatever. All right, so those are my boxes. We're gonna do the same thing, just get a visual understanding of this. But again, keep in mind the shared styles between these boxes, these small boxes. Notice that they're all white background. Notice that they all have the same curved edges. So this is gonna be probably a CSS class I wanna create, because all these boxes, again, have the same exact style. They don't have the same content, but they have the same basic styles. So I'm gonna create a class for this, and let's say the class name will be main div boxes, lack of better name. These will have a white background, so background color of white. They're also going to use border radius. Remember, we saw that, I think, one of our challenges or lectures. Let's do a small border radius. Let's try 8 pixels. I feel like I'm using 8 pixels a lot, so we'll stick with it. So let's give like nice curved edges a little bit. While we're at it, let's actually change the background color. So the background color, I think, is like a grayish color. Let's try CC. Hopefully that's sort of what they have. Okay, let's actually add a border. We haven't talked about borders. Any element can have a border added to it. So a border, let's make it really thin. So looking at LinkedIn, these have, I think, a very, very thin, like probably a 1 pixel border that's some grayish color. So I'll go with border 1 pixel, solid. There's different types. There's like dashed, there's dotted. There's a lot of different border types. I just want a solid line. That's 1 pixel wide. Let's go with the color of darker gray. So we'll go with 88888 for a nice dark gray. All right, let's see what these styles look like. We obviously want some stuff here. So main profile stuff is going to be about me section, and this will be featured content. All right. So we have these main div boxes. Obviously, we need to apply a class. That's not what I've done. I created a class selector. I need to apply the classes or give these elements access to those styles by specifying what class they are going to use. Again, you could use one or more classes. We saw that above. I don't think we actually did anything with it, but I had 2 classes here. You could have as many classes as you need. There's no real limit to how many different styles you can combine with your classes. Okay, so all these small boxes are going to have main div boxes as their style. Let's take a look. Let's see. Okay, this is the actual LinkedIn page. All right, this is what I have so far. Not the closest to what I want, but closer, I would argue. Notice that all this stuff is kind of crammed versus there's definitely some buffer space here. So that's where padding or margin come into play. So let's add some margin because all these boxes are not going to be that close. We could do this in the shared class. Margin, it's going to be top and bottom margin. So margin is going to be with 20 pixels and no left and right margins. See how that looks. Okay, got some spacing. Looks like our side div here is not taking up any space. So let's add some stuff there. So I'm going to add some small boxes. In fact, these are just say main boxes. Any questions? Please ask if there's any confusion here.
Ankur?
Yep.
I just have a quick basic question. So does the class attribute inherit when it's within, like there's parent and child div?
Great question. In this case, like we have, I think I have a class of main gutters and then a class of main boxes. No, good question. So this div was not going to inherit these styles automatically. However, it goes down to the specific CSS properties that you're setting, not the class. Meaning, I think we talked about it yesterday briefly, but if you set like a font property through this class, like let's say main gutters set font color to be purple, if I don't override that here, all of these boxes will have font color of purple because font properties do get inherited. But that's not saying everything from main gutters can be inherited. It's because font properties get passed down, but things like margin's not going to be passed down from parent to child. If I want margins for these boxes and this box, well, I need to specify them at both for both classes, or maybe reuse a class if I want to.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, cool. Thanks for your question. Great question to ask. All right, let's kind of get this going a little faster. So we have main boxes. This should not be here. Should be here. That's my div. All right, let's go with blah and meh. All right, so these are the side div on the right side. Let's take a look what it looks like. Okay, notice that blah and meh are actually on the bottom, right? I want this to be left and right. What I'm trying to make, like this is my blah and this is my meh, but they're not left and right. They are stacks. They are going top down. That's not what I want. Anyone have a suggestion on how I could solve this?
Would it
All right.
be would it be the same as what you did up in the nav bar in terms of the justify?
Yep, you got it. So Fluxbox to the rescue here. So again, by default, without Fluxbox, stuff is always gonna be on top of each other. We don't want that. We want this div right here, blah, the parent of blah and meh, to be to the left, sorry, to the right of my main div. So this is where Fluxbox is going to play. Again, you want to set the flux property on the parent. So in this case, these are the two children, this div and this div. The parent is this div, main content. So you want to set the display property for main content. So where's main content? Right here. So we'll say display flex. Now this will automatically put them left and right of each other. That's a default behavior for Flux. So I'll take a look. There we go. We got blah and meh, and then we got main profile about me section. Obviously not as good as we want it, but we can easily do justified content space between. And that should achieve what we want here. There we go. Notice blah and meh are over here. Main profile about me section stuff is over here. Again, not looking exactly like this, but you guys can kind of see these pieces hopefully coming together. I feel like my, obviously we want to add more stuff here. So let's go with, I'm going to say main div boxes. I don't know if you guys caught my rename, but I renamed my generic class to main boxes. Let's do main div boxes. Let's give them, actually, sorry. Let's give my main div a width. I think that's what I'm liking here. So let's find main div, that selector. I assume I have main div somewhere. Maybe I don't. All right. Main div. I want a width. The width can be, I don't know, ballpark it to be, let's say, with 600 pixels. And then I want side div to be a little smaller because it's not as wide. So let's say side div is going to be 300 pixels. Okay, let's take a look. So now we're specifying the exact width. All right, cool. It looks a little better. We probably want some spacing here. That's probably easy to do. We could say margin right side should be, let's get a good 20 pixels separation. Obviously need my semicolon then. Okay, there we go. Got some spacing. Obviously these boxes don't quite look like these boxes because I don't have any content in there. So let's quickly add some relevant content. I'm just gonna say, how do I want to do this? Let's say side box as another class. Any questions about anything? I know we're going to wrap up probably in the next 15 minutes, so let's get a good 15-minute push here. Let's make these height of, I don't know, 50 pixels. Okay, so these boxes will look a little better. I think I want some padding. So we haven't talked about padding. We talked about it, but we haven't actually applied it. So again, margin is external. So this stuff right here, this is a 20 pixel margin that I added in just a second ago. But I want some padding. I don't want my block to be right at the edge of this box. I don't want my main profile stuff to be right at the edge. If we look at the actual LinkedIn, notice there's like good white space from the edge between the edge and the text. That is padding. That is internal spacing. So I'm going to ballpark this. This may be another 20 pixels. So let's add some padding to our main boxes. All of our boxes should have some padding. So main boxes, padding as opposed to margin is internal. So 20 pixels all around. Let's see how that looks. Oops. There we go. I like it. Looking a little better, We're getting there. Maybe you can add some padding up here, but we'll forget about that. All right, let's actually do the hardest part here. And I know it's gonna be a little rushed because we got like 10 minutes left. I wanna do this box right here. This one is a really challenging layout. So let's do this one. You guys can probably figure out how to add, a header and paragraph text. We do that really quickly, I guess. Let's say let's use a H2 about, and then paragraph tag, Bill Gates is really rich. All right, so that's our about section. Let's do the main profile section. This one gets a little tricky, and we'll see if we have time for it. All right, so that's our about section. Font's a little large, whatever. Let's actually change our fonts quickly because I hate the font. For my body, again, this is our body tag. This is a tag selector. This is a class selector. This is a ID selector. My body tag is everything in my body section. So I want the font to be something nicer. So let's go with, I think, Trebuchet should be good enough. Okay, this looks a little closer to the LinkedIn font. I don't know what official font they use, but all right, that looks a little better. Let's get the main profile stuff. That's what I said I would do. All right, so again, picking out boxes within boxes. This is the whole name of the game of wireframing. Looking at this small box here, I notice at least two boxes. One is the image up here. This image right here is one box. And then down below where the text is, that's a separate box. So let's go back to our diagram. Again, we don't have to do our diagram anymore. I think we get the process. But here, this is going to be, no, that's not what I want. Rectangle. I'm actually going to put it flush with the edge because that's kind of how the image is. So the image is kind of like taking up the top portion, and then I have another box down here, which I'm not going to draw, but there's two boxes here. Actually, fine, I'll draw it. I feel like I say something and I go back on what I say. So this is what that box kind of looks like. This image is flush with the edge. This box has some padding with it. So let's kind of recreate that with more divs. So we're focused on our main profile stuff. So I'm just going to add some white space because it doesn't matter for CSS or for HTML. Let's add another div. Let's say this div is going to be the background image. Say background BG image, keep it short. And then below that, we're going to have another div, and it's going to be ID profile summary. All right, we can do this quickly. H2, I think Bill Gates was the name. Use H3 maybe. Just make it a little smaller. right, so we have Bill Gates, and then he had some blurb about himself, like, hey guys, whatever. I made Microsoft. I don't write some text, so I'm just gonna borrow some text from the web. Let's actually take his text. Simple enough. So he's co-chair, yada yada. Glad that you've done so much with your life, Bill. So we had this. I think this was a different type of heading. So we could do maybe an H4, make it a little smaller. But again, you guys, I'm sure you guys have done enough textual placement. I don't need to belabor the point, but we can do whatever. So that's what our about section is going to look like. Let's see how that looks. All right, this is not what I created. This is what I created. So, okay, we got our, kind of name section here. Notice that the spacing here is a little different. And this is because header elements, paragraph elements have default margins. So if you do not want those margins, you need to override them. So let's actually get an example of that because I think it's a good practice. So again, this is a heading. By default, these margins are automatically added in. In this case, I don't want them. I don't want these margins. So let's change this up a little bit. Let's go with, let's take away these headings for anything within this div. This is going to be kind of weird, but let's go with, all right, I have my ID here. I don't think we cover this. It's a little more advanced CSS, but still basic enough in terms of I would want all of you guys to know it. I could target every single child element here without naming them, right? I don't have IDs for these elements, but I could target them with the parent. And this is what CSS is kind of really good for. So profile summary is my parent. So let's do a selector for profile, what did I call it? Profile heading, no, profile summary. Names are getting hard to deal with, but I don't want to target the profile summary section. I want to target all the children and take away all their margins or the default margins. So here, if you do angle bracket star, the star means anyone, any elements. Doesn't matter what type you are, just target every element. Here, I'm going to remove the margin. So margin top, let's go margin top and bottom, is going to be 0 pixels, maybe 2 pixels to have some padding, and 0 pixels. All right, so I'm overriding the default behavior for paragraphs and headers. They always have margins associated with them. I just took them away. So I overrode the default functionality. So this looks closer to what's over here, right? Obviously, there's different coloring. Not gonna worry about that. I want to get the image and the profile picture in the next 6 minutes, if you guys will bear with me. So let's get the image. Notice the image is flush with the inner box. There's no padding here, so that's something we want to keep in mind. Let's get a quick profile image. Let's go with computer BG image. Let's find something that looks like it go on Bill Gates' background. Let's pick this image. So I'm going to steal its source, copy image address. That's going to be my source for BG image. There are 2 ways we go about this. We could set the background image for this div or have the image tag here. I'm going to go with the image tag. I think that should work for my needs. All right, take a look at that. That is way too big. Notice it actually goes over the parent. The parent is this box back here. The image actually went beyond it. There are ways to control this in CSS. So if I went to the parent, so it's BG image, I can say, hey, children, you cannot, you're not allowed to exceed the boundaries of my div. So we could say overflow equals hidden. That's one way to do it. That will chop off anything that's extra. Notice it's no longer, like it's still a big image, so we probably want to scale it in some manner. I'm not sure the best way to do it, and I don't want to waste too much time. Let's just pick a width that might be close. So we said the width is 600. Let's try 600 pixels. Okay, cool. That's kind of close. Let's chop it off, right? We don't want this large. We want it to be that large. And also, notice that there's margins here. The reason there's margins is because this is a main box. That main box class, if we remember, has padding. Sorry, not margin, has padding. Well, there's different ways to go about this. One way is BG image can say, hey, I want negative padding. I think there should be kosher. Say negative 20 pixels. It's going to kind of negate the padding right here. Let's see if that works. That did not work. So, oops, I added it in the wrong place. I want that in the BG image. That works. Still doesn't work. All right. What else can we do here?
Will it override it if you just put 0? I'm not sure.
So good thought, but it won't override its parent. So the parent main box is the one given the padding. So everything in here is one box, and that's the padding for it. And then we have smaller boxes within that. So they're honoring their parents' padding. Let's see, what's the best way to go about this? Again,
Can you
there's
do width equals 100%, and it would like take up the full size of that particular div that it's the parent div?
I mean, in this case, it won't. It's a good thought. This is going to take the entire space that's allotted for it. So in this case, it's going to just take up the space that it's given. This padding is part of the parent, not part of the child area. But again, there's a ways to do this. CSS is very flexible. Let's see. I feel like negative padding should have done it, but that did not. We can set a height here though. So let's go with height of 100 pixels. Okay, that looks a little better. I do want this kind of gone, so I am going to waste a little bit of time on it. Does anyone have a good suggestion here? There is a way to do this. I have done it before.
Can you just do like top left, right?
You could do
Just make another class, then apply it to it.
Yeah, you could do. So I know someone mentioned the top property. You can do that. That is relative positioning. That gets a little tricky also. So
What about collapse?
collapse? I'm not familiar with that property. Is that a property or a value?
So I'm reading collapse margins. The negative should have worked, but when it doesn't, you can try collapse. I would try, let's see, collapse padding. Let's see if that one works.
Yeah, so let's try margin. Again, this is possible. I apologize that this isn't very important to most of you guys, but all right, margin will do the trick for me. So do -20 margin to override the parent's 20 padding. All right, there we go. So it's mostly flush. Notice that we have these edges though are pointing out. It's probably hard to see on your screen, but they're not honoring the roundness. So this is where overflow hidden. We want to move that to main boxes. Where's main boxes? All right, there you are. That should give me that rounded corner back. I don't know if you guys saw the difference. Do you guys see the difference? Yes, no. All right, cool. We're almost there. The hardest part actually is this profile picture. I will do that in the next few minutes if you guys are willing to stick with me. Let's get a quick profile picture up here. So it's above the title. So it's going to be image. We need a source, src. Let's just take it from Bill Gates' profile pic. Copy image address. Source is going to be yada. That's a gross URL. All right, let's see what that looks like on our page. All right, notice it's square. I mean, images are going to be square. You don't create circular images, but we can solve this with border radius. I'm glad you guys all said it with me. So we set an ID here. ID is going to be profile pic, and then we could target that. Again, a lot of targeting, a lot of CSS selectors here. Profile pic is what I called it. In this case, we want the border radius to be just a full 100% because that's what a circle is. So 100%, see what that looks like. Cool, we got that circle. I mean, the circle's a little large for my taste, so maybe shrink it down a little bit. Profile picture, let's give it a nice width. I'm not sure what I want, maybe 100 pixels. All right, a little small, but we'll go 120 and live with it. All right, so we had 120. Notice it looks pretty good. There's other factors, like notice there's a white area. That's not actually padding or margin. That's actually going to be a border. So we can set a border for this image. The border, it's pretty thick. So it's like a, I don't know, 4 pixel border. It's white and solid. Take a look at that. That's not what I created. There we go. Notice we got a nice circular border here. That looks kind of cool. This is actually inadvertent. I am not fully sure why it's overlapping right now. That's not what I wanted. It's probably because of this margin thing right here. But what if we wanted to move this picture up more? It's kind of hard to see right now. So let me actually clean this up. If I do more -20, -20 pixels, -20 pixels, top, right, bottom, I think is third. So these are the 4 sides. This is top, right, bottom, left, I want to believe. So I'm taking away the bottom margin. And yep, so notice that this is not overlapping this element. Overlapping is not really a thing for elements. They want their own space. They don't overlap like pieces of paper might overlap. They're just kind of like boxes next to each other. So here, what if I want to want to overlap this element over this background image? It is possible with CSS. This gets a little tricky. This will be the last thing I cover, I promise, like pinky promise. Sorry, not crossing fingers, pinky promise. You can overlap things. So by default, everyone wants its own space. But in this case, what if I tell the profile pic, let's make your positioning relative. So this is not the standard. The standard, I think, is fixed, I believe, but don't quote me on that. So let's go to.
I think the standard is static.
Thank you. Yes, that sounds correct. So CSS positioning, there are different types of positioning. So static is the default. Thank you to Phil, I think mentioned that. There are other types. Relative means relative to where you should be. Like if you were static, where would you be? Well, relative would be from there. Fixed means just don't really move. Sticky is kind of cool. Like it will be in a position, and if you scrolls off the screen, it'll stick to one side. You see that like right here. Notice like the top part is kind of staying there. But if I go to the top, it's not at the very top. Like this nav bar is not at the very top. Once I start scrolling, it's basically fixed to the top. That's what sticky is doing. Absolute is basically put it anywhere on the screen based on what I tell you. You guys can read more about it. They're kind of handy in certain types. Most of the time, position static is what we want. So that's the default. But in this case, we want position relative. In order to have position relative work, let's say we want to set top equal to -20 for now. In order for this to work, you actually need to have a parent that is non-static. So in this case, profile pic is within profile summary. So for profile summary, I'm going to say this position is going to be, let's go with relative. I'm a little fuzzy here, but yeah, there we go. So to highlight this, if I do not update, that's not what I want, profile summary. Do I have profile summary? I don't. All right, let's wrap this up. But all right, profile summary has no positioning right now. So if I do this, I guess that still works. Cool. Then never mind. So let's make that -60. All right, so notice it's moving up a little bit. We still have the space here, so that's not ideal. What if we, how can we solve that? Maybe make this absolute. So relative will still take up the area it should, but we'll shift it from there. I think if we do absolute, this should do what I want. Absolute. All right, so now it's -60 all the way to the top. And that's because the parent, there's no relative parent. So right now, absolute saying -60 with respect to the page. That's not what I want, right? I don't want Bill Gates' head to be cut off here. But this is like -60. That's why it's off the page. It's starting at -60. But if I set a position for the parent to be relative, now I'm saying the parent, it's going to be relative to where it should be, but I'm not adjusting the top, bottom, left, or right. So it's not going to move. But now this absolute is going to say this -60 is relative to this parent, not the page. So if I see this now, I think that should solve it. There we go. So notice I got that. I'm obviously cutting off some text over here. So that's going to be, the answer is padding. So profile summary probably wants padding. So this needs padding. All this stuff needs padding, so that gets another div. You guys guessed correctly. That div is going to give us some padding. So let's say ID equals summary. I know these names aren't great. Summary needs some padding. So we create a div, and that div can get some padding at the very top. So let's say padding dash top is going to be 40 pixels. Will that be enough? We're close. We're still cut off a little bit. Let's get a little bit more. Let's say 60 pixels. That should do it. All right, cool. That looks similar to LinkedIn. Again, I'm not saying I've recreated the whole thing, but that's pretty good, I would say, if you allow me to grade myself. Any questions about all this? I know the last part kind of got rushed. I want to give you guys a break for your social activity, but that accomplished a lot of the layout stuff that I wanted to get to. So again, not always easy to get all this working, but it is tedious at times, but that's just kind of how raw CSS works.
Are you gonna make this available, what you did?
Sure, yeah. So I'll submit a pull request to the LinkedIn HTML challenge with the code I worked on today. The video will be uploaded at some point too, so you guys can follow along. But yeah, I think that was hopefully answered some questions or got some starting point. Again, wireframing, kind of important tool, especially when you're early on and can't really pick out those boxes visually. Just actually take a pen and paper. Again, it's not as easy to do it on screen, but pen and paper would be my recommended way of doing it. Draw the boxes you see, draw boxes within them, try to map it out, just the boxes, and that should guide you on what divs and how the layouts work also. Again, we talked about, hey, this stuff is left aligned, this stuff is right aligned. Well, I need that space between, so I want to use Fluxbox for that. And again, it takes practice. I'm not saying it should be easy, but kind of just understand the approach that I took mentally to pick out my sections and then fill those in one by one, going from bigger to smaller. All right, any questions about the madness that was LinkedIn?
Yeah, I got one, just a small one, I guess.
Sure.
How do you go about selecting what would have an ID as versus what would have a class? Like I see some have class and ID, some have just an ID, some have just a class. Like,
Great question. Love the question. Sometimes it's your choice, but the rule of thumb is IDs are when, like, you give something an ID when you specifically want to do something for one box. So here, if I want to do something, especially for my BG image box, I give it an ID because I did something very special for BG image. These things are only for that box, what I've highlighted here. But if you want stuff done to multiple different items, that's where you want to use a class. So one example was class main boxes. All these boxes here, this box, this box, this box, this box, and this box are sharing some properties, some styling properties. So in this case, you create a class, meaning you can apply that class to any number of elements you want. In this case, I applied it to these 5 divs. So they all have the same rounded corners. They all have the same white background, the same padding. I want to make that consistent, right? I don't want to keep applying it like hard coding or rewriting the same style over and over again. So that's when you go to classes, when you're like, hey, all 5 of these boxes, this div, these divs down here need the same style. That's when you want to create a class, which in this case, I called it main boxes, and they all will share the same style that I apply here. So now if I want to just change anything, let's say I don't want a white background, I want a blue background or burly wood. That's the color that just popped up, so I'll go with it. So notice that's easy. It's really easy to change the style too. You change it in one place, applies to everything that's using that class. Did I answer the question, Rod, or any follow-up?
Yeah, that was good. Thank you.
Yep, but again, just to highlight it, let's say, sure, all these boxes are burly wood color, which I just learned today. Let's say I want to make my about section a different color. Well, in that case, it's a special one-off case. So I could go ID, and say, oops, sorry, about is the actual box. This is the only box with an ID of about. I want to say, well, I don't want that background color. I want to create a special color for it. Let's go with aquamarine. Sounds lovely. Well, there we go. So this box has one particular style for it. All the other boxes are still sharing their style. Elin.
Thank you. So just a quick question. I think I lost myself a little bit there. When you use the position, the relative and the absolute.
Yes.
So is this the one with absolute depends on the relative, or is the other way around?
Yeah, it's a great question. I know that part probably got confusing. It's a little more advanced. So it was probably the hardest part for this challenge for me personally, trying to get this image to look where, go above another element. Just to kind of explain that a little more in detail in the next minute or so. Where did that go? Yeah. So the question was, how are we using absolute and relative? And why do we need to set relative on the parent? So absolute is saying, based on the top or bottom or right and left that you tell me, it's going to go to that absolute position, meaning -60. I'm telling it to go to the location that is -60 on the page. Now, the difference is without this, if I take this away, let me comment it out. Again, when I did this, now this element, profile pic, let's find that in here. Profile pic, this image has no reference. So it's going to say, I'm going to use the page as a reference because there's nothing else above me that has a non-static position. So this image is going to say, all right, you told me to go to -60. I'm going to go to -60. But that's not what we want, right? We want that to be -60 with respect to this box over here, right? So whatever, if you guys are familiar with coordinates, again, if you're not, I apologize, but coordinates start at the top left. So this point right here is 0, 0 with respect to this box here. This is where this box starts its coordinate system. This is 0, 0 where my mouse is right here. X position goes this way, Y position goes this way. But if I want this to refer to its parent's box, I need to make the parent a non-static position. In this case, I can make it relative, and relative's not going to change where the parent's going, but it's going to tell its child, hey, you can refer to me for any absolute positioning. You don't have to refer to the page. In this case, position relative allows the child to say, all right, I'm going to reference based on my parent, not on the page. So now if we do this, it says, all right, -60 to where I would have been before. Let me just do that.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's definitely confusing. Again, this was probably the hardest part. So I wouldn't blame you for like, I still don't know how we got that to overlap, but maybe just try it yourself after this lecture if you have time, and maybe you can get it to work and get that sense of joy when you get that image to look right. All right, any other questions before we wrap up here?
Ankur, is there a difference between using percentage and rem or like the pixels?
Yeah, so no, Raphael went over all the unit types. I almost always use either px for pixel, which is like the actual position. So this means go to that position. Percent is just relative. So in this case, with 100%, just this, in this case, says, hey, image, whatever space that your parent's giving you, take up all of it. I can make this 50%, and they'll say, hey, use up only half the space. It takes up only half the space now. It's all relative. So the parent is telling the child how much space it has. The percentages says make it relative to how much size I have. But if I want to make it precisely some value, like let's say I want it exactly to be 200 pixels. Now this is not a percentage. Even if the parent grows, the image is still going to be 200 pixels and not going to change. But if I made a percentage, if the parent grew, the child would be relative to that size. So 50% of whatever the parent is.
Okay, thank you.
Yep, thanks for your question. Okay, I know you guys have a social activity in 1 minute. Apologies. Maybe ask Kat and Courtney if you guys can take a quick break. So I'm sure this is a bit exhausting. Thank you guys so much for coming to the breakout session. Hopefully it was beneficial. If you guys have any follow-up questions, just message me on Slack or actually post in the question channel just so anyone else can benefit from it. And yeah, that was, again, creating a LinkedIn challenge. Again, hopefully you guys can understand the process of wireframing, understand some cool things about like Fluxbox. We talked about, the spacing issues, and creating classes and ID selectors and CSS. A lot of topics, a lot to learn still. So we'll kind of wrap up with that. All right, guys, thanks so much.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks, Ankur.